On behalf of my colleagues from across the institution, I want to welcome you to the Smithsonian Folklife Festival Beyond the Mall. For the next 10 days, we will use our digital platforms to share stories of culture, creativity, and the environment from partners in the United Arab Emirates, the Brazilian states of Bahia, Maranhão, and Pernambuco, the U.S. Department of Energy, and the Solar Decathlon, and our very own Smithsonian Conservation Commons. Although this year we will not be on the National Mall in Washington as planned, the efforts of the festival's remarkable staff, interns, and volunteers continue. During this time of profound challenge and change, the communities with which they work have much to teach us about building an equitable and sustainable future. I encourage you to join us often and to participate actively by including your questions and comments in our program's chat section. As the Smithsonian's 14th secretary and as a historian and educator by training, I find the Folklife Festival's origin story to be particularly relevant to this moment. In 1967, then Secretary Estill and Ripley issued the mandate to take the instruments out of their cases and make them sing. Against the backdrop of the civil rights movement and the burgeoning anti-war protests, he and the festival's creators understood that the Smithsonian had to reflect and challenge America's image of itself. By working with communities from throughout the United States and later the world to bring their stories and cultural heritage to Washington, D.C., the festival made space for difficult conversations and joyful encounters through creative expression. Over the years, the thousands of artisans and cooks, dancers and musicians have contributed to building a festival whose work is as relevant and needed now as it ever was. At this moment, in our homes and on our streets, people of all walks of life are coming together, rolling up their sleeves to operate what Martin Luther King called the beloved community. Manifesting this just society depends on having spaces for hard discussions about racism, intersectionality, decriminalization, and environmental sustainability. It also requires places that celebrate creativity, that spark joy and foster possibility. Yes, culture matters. I am extremely proud of my colleagues at the Center for Folklife and Cultural Heritage, which produces the Folklife Festival, for moving, quote, beyond the mall to ensure that the Smithsonian is able to live its values by amplifying voices in the global chorus of those working towards an equitable future. Thank you again for joining us.
Hello, and welcome to Noon and Conversation and Songs, Future Soundscapes from the UAE. I'm Bill Bragin, the Executive Artistic Director of the Art Center at NYU and Abu Dhabi. We are offering real-time captioning and American Sign Language interpretation for today's program. To view the simulcast that includes these services, please use the links included in the comments section. This event is part of the Smithsonian Folklife Festival United Arab Emirates program, which is supported by the UAE Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, the UAE Ministry of Culture and Knowledge Development, and the UAE Embassy in Washington, D.C. If you're not familiar with the festival, I encourage you to check out their website, festival.si.edu, and follow Smithsonian Folklife on Instagram too. Today, we are thrilled to bring you a live broadcast with Noon, one of the UAE's most innovative groups. I first saw Noon at the first edition of the Wasl Festival in Dubai. After moving here from New York in 2014, I've been wondering, what is the sound of the UAE? With its multinational community, no dominant majority, and where cultural diversity is a standard way of being, where deep traditions and future-looking postmodernism sit side by side, what does the country sound like? I was struck by Noon's influences, which range from Egyptian icon Kulthum to electro jazz stars Snarky Puppy. Since then, they've been part of our programming at the Art Center, most recently performing in January as part of the Barzak Festival. Echoing my own impressions, Noon has been described as the kind of band you might expect, or rather hope to encounter in the UAE, an audio approximation of the Emirates' cluttered cosmopolitanism and contemporary borderless ethos. Now we're going to head to the flip side, the UAE's only independent record store at Al Sirkal Avenue in Dubai. Midway through the set and at the end, we'll have 2 brief Q&As, so please add your questions to the comments in the chat below. Now, please welcome to the stage Mohammed Hosni on oud and vocals, Stephen Bedford on electric bass, and Ratish Chadha on drums. Put your hands together for Noon.
All right. I would like to welcome Mr. Bill Bragin back for this next segment. Bill has been a very, very influential person in the UAE in terms of the progress of music, supporting us, obviously being the face of New York University Art Center in Abu Dhabi. And since moving to the UAE, Bill has given a lot of us music lovers in the UAE a chance to really explore different genres of music through various shows at the Art Center. And now, for this next segment, we would like to call him back to do a little interview with us.
They're just having an issue having him, like he's not showing up for.
Oh, I think we got him.
Go to another song while we get them.
Do a quick one, quick longer. Yeah. Okay, longer.
Switching audio?
All right, we're gonna do one more quick song before Bill comes back to interview us. All right. Mike, 2, check, 1,
All
check.
right. That was great. Ratish, can you hear me? Are we back?
Yes, we
We
are
can hear you, bro.
back.
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, I guess this is what happens when we are doing an interview in between Abu Dhabi and Dubai. We're about 75 minutes away because right now the roads are closed between Abu Dhabi and Dubai, but it's great to see you there.
Great to see you too, Bill.
Yeah. So we are going to have a short conversation, about 10 minutes. Then we'll have you play some more music for us.
Sure.
And during this first piece, I want to talk a little bit for people who are watching from all over the world who aren't necessarily familiar with the UAE and what's going on here. I want to focus a little bit on the larger context, and then when we come back after the second set, we'll talk a little bit more about you all as a band. But one of the things that is so central to the UAE's identity is that people come from all over the world. It is really a crossroads. And the three of you come from very different backgrounds. So just to start with, I'm wondering if you could each tell me a little bit about where you came from, where you've lived, and what got you to Dubai. Let's start with Mohammed Hosni.
Yes. So I came from Egypt, actually Alexandria. It's a little bit like a mix, like a fusion of backgrounds, and only me. Like I came from originally from the southern port in Egypt. It's called Nuba. I love to call it the Forgotten Kingdom. Yeah. And what else? Sorry, forgot the rest of the question.
Great. And then when did you arrive in the UAE, and what brought you to Dubai?
Yeah, I've been here for 5 years. Yeah, and I met Ratish 2 years ago, and here we are.
Okay, great. And Stephen Bedford.
What's up, guys? I'm Steve. I am from the north of England. I kind of grew up listening to really heavy metal. Then I studied music performance and kind of got into the Beatles and funk and soul, and more recently jazz. And I went to university, studied music production in a place called Leeds, which had a thriving underground music scene for basically any style you could imagine. So that was great in terms of exposing me to kind of more underground electronic music, as well as fusions of those styles. I've been in Dubai for 5 years, and I like to bring an element of electronic music to a live situation with traditional instruments and instrumentation. Yeah, I think that's what we always try to do, to be honest.
Great. And Ratish, you're the old timer of the band, right?
I'm the old timer, yeah. Well, I'm from India. I grew up in Dubai and then spent ample amount of time in the States as well. So bounce around a little here and there. I've been back in Dubai now for close to 5 years, I would say. I was in between New Orleans and the UAE for a while, and it was too much distance to travel. So I decided to obviously settle back in Dubai, specifically to start a project of this nature. So also very influenced by jazz and world music and everything in between. And the oud actually was a very special instrument to me growing up. The oud and sitar. And I knew at one point in time, after having gone to the States and being exposed to several different forms and genres of music that I didn't even know like were out there until I had actually moved away from the UAE. So I came back and sort of brought an element of that to Dubai, and obviously found capable individuals of taking that sound forward. So the collection of where we are all from really adds to the collective sound of what Noon really is. And yeah, that's that's something I've been trying to do for many years, but now it's finally in full force.
And I think what the sound is of Noon, which is bringing together all these influences, is really the sound of Dubai, where people are coming from all over. Now, you are in the flip side. You are in really the only independent vinyl store in the country right now at Al Avenue, which is
Right.
a cultural district, the Fridge, the independent venue that you play in frequently, is there. Cinema Akil, art house cinema is there. A lot of boutiques, art galleries, cafes, and so on. So
Right.
it really represents sort of like a new generation of what's happening in the UAE. I'm curious, especially Ratish, since you grew up here off and on, if you could talk a little bit about what the music scene was like when you were first growing up. What was it like, 5, 10, 20 years ago? Where were the independent bands happening? How were bands coming together? Where would they play?
Well, we had this incredible 2-day festival that used to be up and running over here for about, I would say, 4 years or so. It was called Desert Rock Music Festival. So some of the most prominent music to be coming out of the UAE, I would say about 15, 20 years ago, was surrounded around rock and metal. There was obviously a small electronic presence and maybe some stuff in between. But in terms of a prominent genre of music and prominent bands, it was mainly metal and rock. So Desert Rock Festival was definitely one of the first day festivals to exist in the UAE that brought forth a major international lineup, not only specifically for metal and rock. One of the years actually Prodigy played, and that same year Iron Maiden played. So they had somewhat of a diverse lineup, and so I was a big part of the rock and metal and punk scene that was happening along the lines of around 15 years ago, and a lot of the shows actually used to happen in people's backyards and homes, so it was all very DIY to a certain extent, and in terms of major music shows that were happening, I do remember Desert Rock, but in terms of local bands, it was centered around mainly rock and metal in terms of what I was exposed to growing up over here.
And where would people hear about music? There was no Spotify then. There was no Agami. There was no YouTube. There were no record stores like the flip side. So how are you hearing about new sounds that were coming in from outside?
So obviously, being in some of these rock and metal bands, I would get familiarized with the other bands in the scene at the time. But there was a very prominent, sort of like it was like a blog to a certain extent, or a forum. It's called Fried, and Fried was kind of where everyone in the UAE gathered, and not only if you were a musician, but even just an enthusiast of live gigs or music in general, or yeah, I guess it was centered around live shows and music to a certain extent. But yeah, it was a forum that brought everyone together that was looking to get deeper into the music scene over here. So that was one of the main sources in terms of information. But besides that, yeah, there was nothing else. It was all word of mouth.
And I'm curious, when I came up in New York, if you wanted to find a band, you'd either look for the classified ads in the back of the Village Voice, a weekly alternative newspaper, or you'd
Right.
find a poster in the subway with a phone number and you rip it off the wall, or maybe you'd see a band in a club.
Yeah.
You all got together about 2 years ago. How did you
Uh-huh.
find one another?
Well, I guess all credit goes to Mark Zuckerberg at this point in time, because Facebook definitely was a tool to find the right musicians in Dubai. Because see, now what's changed, what Fried once was, now there are several versions of that on Facebook for musicians to find each other. So Fried was the only platform back in the day that musicians had to sort of meet and discuss ideas to start new projects. But now, seeing as Facebook does exist, and it's obviously a massive platform for communication, I found both Hosni and Steven through just digging through musicians on Facebook, and there are several pages specifically for musicians in Dubai. So yeah, one thing led to another, and before I knew it, like, I had exactly the perfect people that I was looking for.
Right, and the title of the conversation is Future Soundscapes, and I
Right.
think as we are looking at all the changes that have been happening with Al Sirkal Avenue coming up, with the Art Center at NYU Abu Dhabi coming up, with Cultural Foundation reopening, the Louvre Abu Dhabi, Dubai Opera. There's so much that is now really starting to happen. I'm curious, as you look forward, what are you seeing as the next development in the next 5 or so years in the UAE? And also, I guess more broadly, I know you were part of the very first festival that just took place in Saudi, the Middle Beast Festival, mostly electronic, but you were on the live music stage. So if you could talk a little bit about the UAE, but also talk about sort of how what you're doing fits into what's happening in the region as a whole.
Well, Saudi was quite an unbelievable experience. It was really hard to fathom the fact that something of that scale existed in Saudi, because obviously for the longest time there wasn't much live entertainment there, and then they did a complete 180 and got some of the highest production, along with some of the most expensive acts, along with just a perfectly curated music festival that kind of popped out of nowhere. And that was an incredible experience for us to be a part of that, and to see that sort of progress that Saudi has made in terms of bringing live entertainment to Saudi Arabia. So, I mean, everything about that festival can be related to any major music festival all over the world. So if you're talking about Bonnaroo, Coachella, or Tomorrowland, or anything to that scale, Middle Beast was precisely that. They had actually taken the production from Tomorrowland in terms of from the audio side, from like the visual perspective and on the audio perspective, and all of the production that was included. A lot of that was apparently from Tomorrowland, and also the one thing that Tomorrowland, I believe, is known for is like the prolific stages that they have, and they also had like amazing installations at Middle Beast, like large stages that we don't even know how they actually did that in a short span of time. But yeah, it was like a really well executed festival, and we were super proud to be a part of that. There was not as much live music, but there was also some support of the local act in Saudi, so we got to see some of the jazz funk enthusiasts in Saudi also play before us, and that was really nice to see, for sure.
And what do you see happening in the UAE, in Dubai and Abu Dhabi? And if you could also talk a little bit about maybe what the differences are between the two cities, as well as what's happening in the rest of the country.
Well, the biggest difference would be you, Bill. The fact that you're in Abu Dhabi, you're stealing the show all the time, but obviously in a good way. And so I would say Dubai definitely has a lot of the creatives living there, but now in the recent couple of years, Abu Dhabi has definitely offered a lot more entertainment that is geared specifically for maybe more musically involved individuals, or people who are looking for something slightly different from what has been available in Dubai for many years. So I guess the major difference would be obviously Dubai for the longest time has had a lot of entertainment widespread all over the city of all genres, but what Abu Dhabi has done is kind of focused and given the UAE types of music and genres of music that they have never been exposed to. Whereas in Dubai, it's kind of like an explosion of everything all at the same time.
Yeah, I would say that across all arts that happen in Abu Dhabi, everything there seems to hark towards maintaining an element of culture, whether that's music or poetry and anything performance related, art as well. In Dubai, it's definitely more of just an explosion, like Ratish was saying, of cultures, whereas Abu Dhabi seems to represent a little bit more the culture of the Middle East and the UAE, whereas Dubai is kind of a bit more towards the westernized side of everything, really.
Great. Well, I know that a lot of people didn't really come to see me talking. They really came to hear you play. So why don't we turn it back over to you to play some more music, and afterwards we'll come in. I know we've already started to get some great questions from the chat, and so we will. I've got some more questions. We'll bring some of the questions in from the audience through the next break. But let's turn it back over to the flip side, and welcome back to the stage, Noon.
Thank you, Bill.
وياكم أبداني وأبيات الأبدان Thank you.
All right, you have been listening to Noon. They are live at the Flip Side in Dubai at Al Sirkala Avenue. I'm Bill Bragin at the Art Center at NYU in Abu Dhabi, and we are here with the Smithsonian Folklife Festival for the UAE program. That was an amazing second set, so thank you all for that. And now that we've gotten to hear a little bit more music, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the band. First, we're going to start with a question that I'm sure you hear a lot, but it was one of the first questions that came up from Betty over Facebook, and that is about the name. If you could just explain the name New and where that came from.
So we were always looking for something. We were always looking for something relatively simple to obviously relate to the Western world and to the Middle Eastern world. So if we had gone too much of a Western route with the name, then it wouldn't be an appropriate representation of the sound. And if we had gone with a name that's slightly too Arabic, it would have been maybe harder to pronounce in the Western world. So Noon, representing the Arabic alphabet, is sort of the simplest correlation to the music that we're making. So in like anyone who would hear the name Noon from the Arab world would obviously immediately know that they might or might not have Middle Eastern elements, and in the Western world, obviously Noon is a name that's used for many different projects and many different things. But we just wanted something that would sit sort of right in between in terms of the Western and the Middle Eastern world, and Noon seemed to fit appropriately.
Great, and and I think that really speaks to some of the other questions that are coming up. I know in the chat, a couple of people have made a comparison to surf music, which makes sense because Dick Dale, the father of instrumental surf music, was actually Lebanese American. So there is some real connection to music from the region. Now, you've described the music as experimental, Oriental jazz rock. But also, in January, you presented a tribute to Kulthum that was at the Art Center. That
Right.
also included elements of Afrobeat, and Afro-Cuban jazz was also in there. I know Nubian music is a big part of Hosni's influences. And one of the questions that came up online was about your traditional influences and what some of those are. And I'll add to that, you've got a whole record store around you. If we sent the three of you
Of
out
course.
into the shelves and you had to dig through the stacks and pull out a record or two from some of your musical heroes, what records would you be pulling out?
Hosni, you can go first.
I don't know what to say, but like this music, it's originally from my background. It's kind of a mesh between the Arabic scales, which is needs a lot of like education and you know, um, and that's it. I don't know how to describe it. I'm just the music is it's the better way is to listen to it or to feel it. But to
And so
describe it for
when you
me,
were growing up,
yeah,
listening to kind of more traditional,
yeah,
either Nubian music or Arabic, Egyptian classical music or film music, who were you
yeah,
listening to? Who were your heroes?
both, and everything. I was this kid of like I wanna listen to everything, you know, and then yeah, the most things that I'm playing now, the most things I liked, the Nubian and the Arabic scales, like Hijaz, Nahawand, Rust. This scales that has a quarter tone
Mhm.
that it's not included in the Western music. Yeah, so that's it.
So you made reference to a couple of different musical scales that probably people heard as you were playing today, but didn't know what they were. Can you maybe just give an example of Hijaz or some of the other modes that you've been drawing from, just so people can have that reference
Yeah,
point?
yeah,
Yeah,
sure, I
pick up
can
the
play them.
yeah
Yeah,
yeah
right.
yeah please yeah.
Yeah. So for Hijaz, it's if we're playing from G, I'm gonna play it
Mhm,
like that. So this is called Hijaz.
mhm,
Okay. This was in Walks on Nawa, the first song we played, and also in Longan Hawand.
mhm.
We have also Rust that we used in C4 song,
Mhm.
which is like that. So if we're gonna play major, it's like that, right? From C. Okay. So Rust is making like quarter tones in two melodies like that. So this is what makes the sound of the song different, and the
Mhm.
feel of the scale is totally different thing. Yeah.
Great. So I think this is actually a good time to bring Steve in because as the other melodic instruments, uh, I imagine that these aren't necessarily modes that you typically would play in with other projects. So once you're developing a song, how are you taking some of these quarter tones and kind of moving it into this more of a jazz funk kind of mode, and how do you
Uh,
adapt to that?
I'll say definitely in the beginning, these sounds were completely foreign to me. So there was like a trial and error process of trying to find sounds that my instrument is capable of making, which doesn't include quarter tones and half tones, which is what makes the oud sound Arabic, for want of a better word.
Mhm.
Um, there's, I always think of everything that he's playing in terms of variations on the Western scales, for example. So I would think of um, like Rasta's. It's basically it's C harmonic minor, which is the Western term for it. Um,
Okay.
so some songs, I'll have to play a scale that's like the nearest approximation of what Hosni is playing, which sometimes frustrates Hosni because I'm physically not capable of playing the tones which my ears are not really accustomed to. But Hosni can hear it very, very clearly when I'm not playing exactly the same thing as him, if you know what I mean.
Mhm.
I could play the same. The instrument is capable of playing those tones. It's just quite impractical to bend like a tiny amount, which my ears are not really accustomed to, whether I'm doing it correctly or not. So there's definitely, it's just a case of finding the most appropriate sounds or playing more neutral sounds which accent some of the notes within the scale that I can play.
And so when you're in the studio and you're developing a song, does one of the band members bring in a melody and the other ones then kind of build around it, or does it start from jam sessions and you're all sort of finding the space and composing collectively?
It varies with every single song, to be honest. Sometimes Hosni will bring an oud melody, or Ratisha's got a beat. Usually I prefer to work off of one of these elements, so I kind of bring the first thing to the table the least, if you know what I mean, because I shine when I've got something else to work with. But every song is very, very different. Sometimes it'll be more groove based. Sometimes it'll be 100% based around the melody. But for me, I kind of like, in terms of like traditional playing, Hosni's playing the lead, and I'm kind of defining the whole rest of the harmony. So it's kind of like it's all open to me, basically, what the harmony is to a certain extent.
Right, and then you've got the rhythms where Ratish is bringing in funk and break beats and jazz and a bunch of other rhythms, and often kind of flipping from rhythm to rhythm within the context of one song.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering, kind of how does that part get introduced?
That's a tough one, actually.
That's more collective between me and Steven in terms of when the melodies are solidified from Hosni's side, the arrangement tends to change between me and Steven because it's the nuances within the melody that make the rhythm sort of out of the ordinary, so to speak. So we experiment a lot with odd time signatures that we're very influenced by obviously a lot of the musicians that we look up to. And also, for some reason, if you play an odd time signature as opposed to something that's 4/4, or also referred to as common time, it just feels better, especially with an oud involved with world music. And that's actually been it ranges from some of my earliest influences of world music with the likes of a project called Shakti, which a very famous guitarist from the West actually went all the way east, collaborated with prolific Indian musicians, and formed one of the first real Indian fusion projects from back in the 60s and 70s. It was John McLaughlin, Zakir Hussain, and I believe Ravi Shankar was involved at times, but he was on a permanent member. But that's when they started including these scales from the Eastern world within the Western world. And a lot of their music was also based on odd rhythms and odd time. So I think that's something that naturally implements itself in our music, and especially in the rhythm section. So a lot of the time, when the melody comes along, the arrangement between me and Steven, like, it's either to fit the melody exactly or to go completely the other route, and that's what we try and do.
And I think the introduction of sorry to cut you off, Bill. The introduction of these odd time things isn't kind of just for the sake of adding something odd time. Like, odd time is generally associated with feeling quite jarring, but we try to make it feel as good as possible, if you know what I mean. So it's not kind of, it doesn't alienate the average listener. It still feels good. Like, sometimes we play it and people ask me what time signature is that, and I have no idea because it feels normal. Yeah, that's the whole. We try, especially with an instrument that's slightly more free than Western instruments. We can definitely manipulate the idea of time and rhythm. And the good thing about that is that we only sit with certain. The only reason we even include odd time elements into the music is because it feels more natural than anything. It doesn't feel unnatural. Sometimes, like what Stephen was saying, there are certain things within certain pieces of music that are so all over the place but well put together, but you can still feel the fact that it's odd. But with us, we try and make those odd time signatures feel more natural than anything else.
Great. Now, one of the things that as you're talking about how things feel natural and unnatural and a little bit odd, I think the reality that we're all living in right now is that things feel quite odd and unnatural, and we're doing a lot of workarounds. In the middle of, I know that the UAE was kind of locked down for 3 to 4 months. Right
Right.
around that time, you all were finishing a record. I know we had hoped to actually record some of it at the university, but we weren't open to the
Right.
public. Yet you still recorded a record. You're still putting a record out. How are you moving forward, kind of as a band at these very odd meter times to keep looking to the future and keep sharing your music?
I mean, it was an accumulated, contained creativity that just burst out of us as soon as we were able to sort of meet each other. Because, like, the entire world was on lockdown, and so were we, and we weren't really able to meet each other. We made, the effort to uh, try and jam remotely by making separate videos and then putting it together. The common thing that sprung up on Instagram
Right.
between several musicians, but obviously that doesn't cut it. That doesn't. That's not gonna like really have the outpouring feel of the creativity that's within you. And so as soon as things opened up and became slightly more lenient, we jumped straight into the studio and we recorded with an amazing engineer and musician named Asad Lakis at Bullfunk Studios. And within 3 days, we tracked 7 amazing songs with 1 hour to spare. I have to include that 1 hour to spare because we did not think we would have even a millisecond left. But yeah, Asad was extremely helpful, and the studio session went really great. Like, all the songs that we had previously known, we had made last-minute changes because we had been thinking of the idea of already recording. So we came into the rehearsal space with like solidified ideas to take the songs from 80% to like 120%, and that's what we went in the studio with, and it was incredible. And we're very excited. We're very excited.
Great. Well, speaking of having a little bit of time to spare, I am actually getting word that we actually have a little time to spare for you to play one more tune. So if you've got something in mind, I know the fans on the chat have been falling in love with your music. I think you've got a lot of old friends who are here watching, and you
Hello,
also have
old
a bunch of
friends,
new
and hello,
fans.
new friends.
So give them the one more. Give them. I know you spent a lot of time in New Orleans, so give them a little bit of Lanya.
Let's do it.
All right.
All right.
Okay, so we're gonna go in between the African, in between the Middle Eastern, and in between the Nubian scale. This song is called Nubian Dance.
All right, that was new. That was amazing, guys. Thank you for that extra one. So let's hear it one more time. On bass, Steve Bedford. On drums, Ratish Chadha. And on the oud and vocals, Muhammad Hosni.
Thank you.
That is Noon, and if you want to check out more of their music, they are on Bandcamp and SoundCloud. Their website is noonband.com. They've got a brand new record that just came out. You can stream it for free, but it's even better, pay for music. It's a good thing. All of the artists appreciate that. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. And this is going to be up for a little while, so please do share it with your friends. Turn people on to the sound of the UAE. I think in that song you heard all of those different influences that I was talking about, that they were talking about. They really captures the meeting place that the UAE is and the way that it actually really creates something new for the future. I want to also thank all of the behind the scenes team who worked on today's event. That's Elisa Huff, Sarah Rothman, Ginny Maycock, Diane Nutting, Alex Taggart, Jason Morris, Pablo Molinero Martinez, Zaki Gul, Michelle Bambling, Rebecca Fenton, Shade Magala from The Flip Side, Jed Peralta, and Azrael Fernandez. I want to thank all of my colleagues at the Art Center at NYU Abu Dhabi, as well as our co-hosts at The Flip Side and Al Sirkal Avenue in Dubai, as well as everybody at the Folklife Festival's UAE program. It was supported by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation from the UAE Ministry of Culture and Knowledge Development, and the UAE Embassy in Washington, D.C. The Smithsonian Folklife Beyond the Mall program continues. Check out upcoming events here on Facebook or the festival website. And if you want to stay in touch with the Art Center, you can find us at nyuad-artcenter.org, or we're on social media at NYUAD Art Center, which I guess I put in my little ID at the bottom. We are so grateful that you could all join us. Thank you one more time to Noon, and take care. We hope to see you soon.